because, okay, I'm recording. I hope that will continue working later.
Okay. So hello, welcome everyone to the first Metrictank community call. Thank you for coming. We're just going to go over a couple things. We have some announcements to make. So we've recently enacted governance for the Metrictank open source project. And that's all up in the Github repo. There's a governance.md doc that you can go check out if you want. I'm not going to go over it because it's a really long, probably boring read for most of you. We also have a new Slack channel on public Slack, which is metrictank-dev. And that's where we will be discussing development of the Metrictank open source project. So if you are interested in development, please feel free to drop by and check that out. We also have the Metrictank channel in public Slack, but that's more for user support and general questions.
So when we say public Slack, we mean Raintank Slack, right?
Yes, our Grafana's public Slack. We set up a couple of mailing lists for user support and development as well, and those links can be found in the community documents and I think in the governance documents also. We're not quite sure yet where we're going to focus our efforts for support. If it's going to be through mailing lists or some type of forum, we're still determining that. So that may change slightly in the near future. Some other things, we've recently updated our website, which is at grafana.com/oss/metrictank. And we have a new team member, and I believe he's on, we have Metrictank project has a new team member, and I believe he's on this call. Yep, there's Sean Hanson, so please join me in welcoming him.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes care of the big announcements. What I was hoping to go over in this first call was where to get help and documentation. So I noticed that we typically get questions on the our Slack's Metrictank channel, and there's not really some of the questions could be answered through documentation, some of them maybe not. But we do have a pretty extensive amount of documentation. If you're familiar with the project and have been to the GitHub repository, then you'll know we have most of that listed out there, but it's not always intuitive of where you might want to find the information you're looking for. Metrictank is a pretty big, complex project. So when you're first getting into it or trying to test it out or set it up, it may seem a little bit daunting. So I'm going to share my screen if I can. Just 1 second, sorry. Okay, can everyone see that, or are you looking at a blank window? Are you looking at a notepad file?
Yes. Yes.
All right, hold on. That was not the window I wanted to share. There, that's what I wanted to share. Okay, so this is the GitHub repo for Metrictank. And if you scroll down to the bottom to where you get to docs, it's got a bunch of links to the documentation and then some stuff on the features. So all of this is contained inside our there, sorry, in docs. So this is all broken out into the individual MD files in case you ever need to look through these for any reason. That's where the documentation's stored, but if you shouldn't need to do that. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that here's the documentation. I know it's not always quite as easy as it maybe should be, and some of it needs updating, which we're currently working on. It's just taking some time. Anyway, there's not really too much in that. So now I just open it up to questions. Does anyone have any questions or anything?
I have a question which might sound stupid, but we have two non-Grafana people here, correct? XBBNKKT and Jean Hanson. Just to, of course, those are the people who are now on the spot of being invited to, or not? Robert, if you're talking, you were muted. Yeah, I was just trying to get, because I don't know the names, but I think we have two guests here, so to speak. So the two of you are actually like the VIPs in this call. Because everyone else of us, we can just talk internally if we need to. That is mainly about you. So anything you might want to ask, you're more than welcome to, either now or at any other time.
Yeah, I didn't come in with any specific questions. I was kind of I'm kind of wondering or curious what the current I guess priorities are, or short-term goals versus long-term goals of the project, or anything like that.
I can give that a shot, and then maybe other people can chime in. So we're actually internally we're having some conversations as well about what should be on the roadmap. I think one thing that's pretty high on the list is we have a lot of really awesome functionality that a lot of people don't even know about or think that the project is dead. Like a lot of people think Graphite is dead or think Metrictank is dead. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty high priority item on the list to try to fix. So we're going to start doing a lot more marketing, so to speak. Blog posts, demo videos, webinars, you name it. Robert actually has a whole plan on how to do that. Other than that, I think bug fixes, more functions, more native functions. We want to work on latency. I'm sure I must be forgetting a couple of things, but those, on the top of my mind, those are the two biggest things. Is like marketing and just improving our response path, making it faster, making it more stable, reliable. If anyone else wants to chime in and correct me on that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So for my main effort is building a larger community around Metrictank. Historically, it's been a pretty small community as far as the development efforts go, and I'd like to change that. So this is one of the reasons we decided to enact governance and add new members to the governance team, right? Anyone who's actively developing or actively contributing to the project and has any kind of stake in its future, I think it would be beneficial to get them on board. And aside from that, so I guess kind of what I alluded to earlier with the mailing list versus forums, we would really like to build a better help base based on previous experience, right? So a lot of new users with any software are going to have very similar problems when they first start using it or testing it. So instead of trying to capture all of that in a living help document, we would like to have something else set up, like a mailing list or a forum, where it's a little bit more interactive than just us creating PRs to edit the document. And then this meeting, I guess, this meeting's part of it. So we welcome questions from users. Any experience they have to share, things that they had trouble with, things that they would like to see, if they're interested in where the development is going, or if they want to be a part of it, or just influence it. And then everything that Dieter said.
And by the way,
sorry.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, I think that there's, as far as, from the Bloomberg perspective, when we were searching for a time series data store that could scale to what we needed, it was pretty slim pickings, especially since we were pretty much stuck with on-prem installs because we can't use any hosted platforms. So I think there is kind of a sweet spot between the enormous companies that, are just going to build their own thing, right, and run with it, and the small companies that are just going to use, whatever they can off the shelf, and the companies that pretty much none of the off the shelf stuff is just going to work for them, but they're also, not quite willing to invest in developing their own, their own in-house store. Maybe that's a sweet spot or a target demographic.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good point. I mean, that sounds kind of like our customer base, now that you mention it. By the way, just to Richard's earlier point, the plan is for future meetings to grow or change this ratio of Grafana Labs people and external people. Obviously, towards the future, we hope that there's going to be more and more external people joining this call.
And we're also going to have demonstrations and more fun stuff. This is the first one, so this is the pilot to see who shows up. And we noticed, we already had a problem with the Zoom links, which we'll fix. But the future ones should have more interactive, fun things for you to do and look at.
And this is also very much an invitation to get other people, for example, within Bloomberg or other companies, to just join and maybe also bounce questions about maybe testing something or whatever. Like the large intention behind this call is to really have an interface which is largely driven by the community, and ideally Grafana goes more into the position of answering, not actually driving. Like that's the perfect outcome. So literally anyone is more than invited to help structure the whole thing and help shape the whole thing, because that's literally what this call is for. It's not just us sitting here and talking about stuff. It's about getting people or doing whatever people want to be doing. Or put stuff onto the agenda for the next call or whatever. Like, be bold and do whatever you want to see.
Yes, that.
Can anyone freely edit the agenda?
No.
That you have to make suggestions and those can be accepted. I think that's how it's set up. But that should be the bare minimum if it's not. But I think that's the way it's set up currently.
Makes sense.
Or you just open it up. Of course, usually there is not too much abuse and you can always lock it down if there is abuse happening. But either way. But basically, people are invited to put stuff onto the agenda, especially if they're not Grafana Labs employees. Like within reason, obviously, but.
By the way, Sean, just to give you a little bit more context too, at Grafana Labs, we have these OKRs, which is basically objectives and key results. And one of my OKRs for the past quarter was reducing error rates. So basically have fewer render queries that return in errors. Actually, I had another one about latency as well. We didn't meet our latency goal. But I think for the next quarter, we're basically going to repeat both of those objectives and just keep working on reducing the amount of errors on the response back and reducing the latency by, implementing more native functions or whatever else we can come up with.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. I think, from just to kind of put some stats in there, I think our error rate is somewhere around 0.002 or something percent. We do about 150 queries a second. So, we infrequently get errors, and I think a lot of them are categorized. So I'm just using the render stats that come back from Metrictank, but even bad requests that get proxied to Graphite, Graphite will throw the error, and that comes back as an internal server error right now, rather than a bad request. So it gets caught by the 500s rather than the 400s. So if I filter those out, I think most of the bad ones are then timeouts, and even the timeouts are generally the requests that query to Graphite and then run on a large time range, which again, there's not really that much to do about that aside from implement those functions natively.
Sean, recently I've been making a lot of contributions to Graphite to solve one of the problems that you just mentioned, which is that Graphite on bad input often raises a exception which results in 5xx. So I added a feature called input validation, which at the moment is optional. By default, it's off. But if you turn it on, then it basically validates the input before passing the parameters into the functions. And on invalid input, it returns a 4xx to clean up the statistics, to be able to figure out which error is actually a 5xx and which one shouldn't be one. Because we had exactly the same problem, that our 5xx rate was way higher than it should have been because a lot of the bad input resulted in 5xx too.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'll admit our Graphite web version is pretty old at this point. So is that available in the last release?
It's available in master for sure. I don't remember when the last release was tagged. And what I'm usually doing is so if you turn the feature off, then when it detects invalid input, it will still log. It gives you a log line. So what I do is I roll out the latest version. Then I basically check which of the requests would get rejected if I will turn it on. And if I see, okay, those are all really invalid requests, then I turn it on. And from then on, all of those invalid requests are actually getting rejected with a 4xx.
Perfect. That sounds great, actually. Thank you.
By the way, I'm curious, how many of your queries are still going through Graphite, or did you already cover most of the functions in Metrictank?
Yeah, I think going like last month, it was about 2.5% were getting proxied to Graphite. In this last wave of native functions that we've either upstream the PRs or we're about to upstream the PRs, we're down to 0.25. So
that's cool.
Pretty much almost no proxying. And I think at this point we've decided the only new functions we're going to try to implement are if there's like a known use case that it needs to be queried at a high rate, or there's like a known performance issue. So mostly I think we're going to let it settle for a bit.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
We're about at 13% internally. 13% of our requests involve Graphite still. But we also want to try to get them down. By the way, amazing contributions.
Thanks.
Really, really helpful.
Cool. Do you know what functions you plan on targeting with those then?
Not off the top of my head.
By the way, inside those 13%, does that include all of the invalid queries which have not been parsed by Metrictank because they're invalid and then they just error on Graphite? Or is that only succeeding queries?
Yeah, this is only queries that succeed, that it parses, that it doesn't think it's bad, and then it just says this function doesn't work. So at a very quick glance right now, it looks like we have some whole winter stuff, moving average. I don't know realistically when we're going to have the resources to tackle these, because these seem fairly complicated functions.
Yeah.
We do have a bit of a backlog right now.
So just to let you know that the PRs that we haven't submitted yet that we're still running locally is time shift, and we have a work in progress for moving window, which will take moving average, moving max, moving sum, all those. And I think that one we're going to try to just do partial support, like we discussed in that PR, that will just support the time-based window, not the number of points window.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it'll depend on the query for how much that'll affect proxying, but that'll be an interesting one, I think, because that one is one of the ones we have an issue with a lot of points. If it tries to do a moving window with a large time range and a large window size, it's very, very slow in Graphite.
That's a good point. I mean, you mentioned you want to prioritize functions which have like known performance issues in Graphite, but we actually haven't done that research to really figure out which specific functions are much slower in Graphite than it could be in Metrictank. We have
I mean, it's not even necessarily that, you know, the Graphite implementation is slow or bad. It's part of it is that it's, you know, Python versus Go. Part of it is that, you know, for the Graphite requests, we pretty much always return as fine-grained data as we can to Graphite. And I think just the encoding decoding cycle through Graphite Web is, I think, just slow on its own. I think there was one other thing, but I can't remember what that is. Off the top. Oh, some functions do multiple round trips in Graphite.
We have also recently noticed that by disabling the number of threads in Graphite and increasing the number of processes, we got a large speed improvement because of we suspect it's because of the Python global interpreter lock. I don't know what settings you're running with, but yeah, for us, this made quite a big change.
Yeah, I think we have 12 Graphite Web instances, and, you know, I think we get way less than 12 per second that go to Graphite. So I don't think it's so much that. I think it's more just, you know, when it ends up being a lot of data, it gets slowed down. I mean, there's always going to be that extra data pass, right? Where for Metrictank, you can process the data right in the query node. For Graphite, the query node's going to have to encode it again after it gets it all back from all the read nodes, send it to Graphite. Graphite's going to have to decode that, do what it wants, back to whoever started the query. There's just the extra round trips. It's never going to be, I mean, implementations being the same, it should never be as fast in Graphite as it is in Metrictank.
Yeah, for sure.
But I will say with moving window, I think that the implementation in Graphite, I'm trying to remember, I think it was an M times N, where N is the time range and M is the time range and N is the window size. So it is a pretty complex algorithm, you know, Big O style, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not sure if in the first pass we'll try to fix that in Metrictank, or if we'll try to kind of duplicate the implementation and see if there's still a performance issue in the you know, faster language.
That would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah. I mean, we have done that for some things. Like we do the naive implementation kind of from Python to Go, and then find out, you know, it's still just not where it should be. And then, you know, we go do another pass.
Cool. So next time I'm going to make a slide deck. I'll have that up somewhere where everyone can access it also, with everything laid out a little bit better, and links. Just looking at the meeting agenda, it's pretty basic. Doesn't really provide a lot of information. So thank you Thank you everyone for coming. Unless anyone has anything else, I'm going to call it here.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It's fun.
All right. Hope to see everyone again next time.
Yeah, it was fun.
Have a good
See
one.
you.